Nintendo controllers have changed a lot over the years. They've gone from being very simple to overly complex, and had some features and gimmicks that weren't even used. Today I'm going to discuss over 40 years of Nintendo controllers from the early 80s to today. For me, it all started with the Game & Watch. Although this isn't a console controller, it's known for having the first D-pad. This was my first experience with a Nintendo controller, and it was incredible despite it being just one game. Then came the NES. Looking back at it now, the rectangular shape of it isn't as comfortable as modern controls because it digs into your hands. But the buttons all feel incredible. The 2 action buttons wouldn't be nearly enough for games of today, but they got the job done for most of the simpler games of the 80s and early 90s. The Super Nintendo controller solved the issue of lack of buttons. Not only did Nintendo add 2 new buttons on the front, but they also added 2 shoulder buttons, which was revolutionary at the time. The diagonal placement of the buttons on the front made some of the games easier to play. 2 of them are concave and 2 convex, which made them easier to feel for during a heated battle. This essentially took everything from the NES controller and made it super. 5 years later, Nintendo leaped into 3D and gave us the N64 controller. I have mixed feelings about this one. On one hand, it was revolutionary with the analog stick, but what's up with the 3 handles? The idea is that you could play 3D games like this and 2D games like this. Or if you wanted to be really different, you could play like this. The new C buttons were often used as camera controls. The L and R buttons returned along with the new Z button, which was used as a trigger in many games. And Nintendo started to experiment with fun new colors. But all the additional buttons and different ways to use this thing made it a bit confusing to use overall. Then Nintendo fixed most of the N64 issues with the GameCube controller. It's a lot more comfortable and easier to use. The improved analog stick is 10 times better than the N64's, and the new C stick made controlling cameras better. However, I've never been a fan of this huge A button. It gives it too much importance when most games need 2 or 3 primary buttons to play. There weren't many 2D games anymore, so Nintendo made the D-pad incredibly tiny on this thing. This was probably Nintendo's boldest move when it came to controllers. The demand for the Wii was absolutely insane when it first came out, and it was mostly because of the cool motion controls. With many of the Wii games, you had to point this at the TV or move it in a particular way to control the games. And don't forget the wrist strap, or you could send grandma to the hospital. There is an analog stick with a nunchuck attachment, but I never liked how you need a wire to connect it to. I did love the fact that you could rotate the Wiimote and act as a perfect NES controller for your downloaded games from the Wii shop. But Nintendo started adding all these add-ons and other controllers, which started to make things confusing. Then Nintendo decided to try something new again. The Wii U gamepad put the screen right in the middle of the controls. It included all these new extra features like controlling your TV, and it even had a camera to take pictures, but no one ever really used that stuff. The controls themselves aren't bad. The analog stick, D-pad, and button placement is all in the right location. My main issue is that the heavier weight and awkward shape of the gamepad made playing this thing for long periods of time uncomfortable. And game developers didn't really take advantage of the screen, so it just ended up being used as a portable, which I was actually fine with. The Nintendo Switch controllers, aka Joy-Cons, are unique in the way you can use them. You can slide them into the side of your Switch, use them with the grip, or even play them on the side like a tiny NES controller. The versatility of them makes for a really fun experience. However, the controls do seem kinda crammed, and I really miss the actual D-pad for 2D games. Nintendo always seems to innovate and come up with unique designs for their controllers. I'm excited to see what they come up with for the next console.